We had game night last night. We had some friends over. Shoe, how'd you do?
0 for 3. Last place in all of them.
One of them, pretty negative points. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that game in a bit, too.
Welcome to the Going Analog Podcast. I'm your host, Christina, and I am here today with Shoe.
Hi.
He's always here. He's great. Yay. We just had so many games to talk about that's all this episode is going to be about. We got some great games to cover from our publishers, and so we wanted to talk about small box games, medium box games, large box games, a lot of games today. So
yeah, these are all media copies for full disclosure, but they've been games we've been playing for a little while now, so we feel like we're ready to finally talk about them.
Finally. So we're just going to dive right in. We're going to start with some small box games. So we just played last night, and Shu had I don't know, what was the score? Negative 49, something around there. We were playing Bottle Imp. Really interesting trick-taking game.
Yeah. So this game by Grail Games is a remake of an older game called Bottle
Imp. From the 90s? Something I looked it up. It's like a pretty old game.
Yeah, it's an old trick-taking game with some new rules, of course, like every trick-taking game these days.
Art's amazing on
first,
this new edition.
I want to do is read this little bit blurb because I read this to everyone who plays it. So typically when Christina and I teach games, we like to read the flavor text because they spent some time crafting this little bit of world building and what we're doing, and it gives context for what you're doing. But this one I really like in particular. So actually, you should read it because you're better at this stuff. You're better at reading than I am.
Reading, yes. This is from The Bottle Imp by Robert Louis Stevenson. Of glass it is, but the glass of it was tempered in the flames of hell. An imp lives in it, and that is the shadow we behold there moving. Or so I suppose. If any man buy this bottle, the imp is at his command. All that he desires, love, fame, money, houses, all are his at the word uttered. There's one thing the imp cannot do. He cannot prolong life, and it would not be fair to conceal from you. There's a drawback to the bottle. For if a man die before he sells it, he must burn in hell forever. It cannot be sold at all unless sold at a loss. If you sell it for as much as you paid for it, back it comes to you again like a homing pigeon. Threatening.
Yeah, so, and then alongside, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's these little glass acrylic bottles that you've used in the game. There's a couple of them because there's a 2-bottle mode, but they're really cool looking, and there's a little evil imp inside. But anyways, the game is set up. It's a trick-taking game, so it's in case you're not familiar, you play a card, you lead with a suit. So whoever's first one to put down a card, everyone else must follow suit. They have to play a card of the same suit
if they can.
If they can. So in Bottle Imp, basically the cards range from 1 to 30-some in terms of rank, but in the middle is 19. You put the little acrylic bottle on it, and that's the price, the current price. So if everyone plays cards, whoever's the highest usually wins. But if anyone could underbid that price and go under the price, so in this case you start out at 19, then the highest price underneath the imp price takes the bottle and will win the trick. So in an example, someone might play a 30, a 35, a 34, and then if the next person plays an 18, the 18 will actually win that trick because they're the only one to go under the bottle price at the time, and they set the new price. So there's all these tricks, different ways of winning the tricks, and then you want the bottle because then you've also won the tricks, and winning tricks will give you points. But if you can't get rid of the bottle by the end of the round, when all the cards are played, then you'll get negative points. And at the beginning of the round, everyone discards one card to the middle of the table that's known as the Devil's Trick, and then those will have the points that the owner of the bottle at the end will lose instead of...
And they don't score any
They don't score any positive points.
Which was shocking because she was so good at that. So,
yeah, I lost a lot. I lost so many points. But the game really... So the first time I learned it, I was reading the rules and I read it twice. I'm like, I don't understand the strategy to this game at all. It was just so bizarre. It's quiet you. I did all right the first time I played. So it's hard to understand the strategy until you play a couple of rounds.
Yeah.
And then because it's mechanically not difficult at all. Like, it's like, okay, this is how it works. But the first time I taught it, I couldn't tell people why you would do things or when you would do things. I'm like, you're all going to learn it with me. But then as we played, so I was playing this with a few of our friends the first time, and then they were like, oh, like slow realization, like, I got to time it this way, or I got to get rid of this card at this time so I don't get stuck with the bottle. And I'm trying to screw other people because part of the setup is also you're going to give a card to each of your neighbors. So there's a lot of fun strategy in this game. There's a lot of ways to come to arrive at victory.
I've only played it once, so I make fun of Shoe for doing poorly, but I did not really do that well. I had like 20 points and the winning person had like 130 or something like that. So I didn't do well anyway. But it's very strange to wrap your head around, but I am interested to come back to it as a trick-taking game. It's definitely not a traditional one. There's only 3 colors, and then they don't all have the same numbers. So you have there's a very handy little like cheat sheet for this that shows you like the order of everything. But it's like a very strange game, but it also fits the theme of being very strange, and that fable helps explain what you're doing really, really well too.
Yeah. It's just weirdly maybe the only one of the few thematic trick-taking games where like, oh yeah, this bottle is great until you have it at the end, and then you go to hell with it, right?
Go to hell, yeah.
So it's also really cool if you're watching this on YouTube. It's not going to really come through on camera, but this is the back of the card. It's this really ornate art,
embossed and shiny.
Yeah, there's this red embossed sort of metallic ink on it. It's like really, really cool. Everyone I've broken this game out to has like looked at these cards in amazement. They're like, ooh, over it, and feeling the backs of these cards. I hope they last over time because I can't imagine this is going to look new after like hundreds of play, like this great.
Right.
But it's just this intricate art. It kind of looks vaguely like maybe really old Middle Eastern in style, or maybe Asian in style in some ways. But yeah, it's just a really cool looking game. And then after that first play, that first group, I remember clearly because everyone was like, it went from, how do you play this game to like, ooh, that slow dawn and that slow realization of what the strategies could be, to like, oh, like another, like multiple light bulb moments as you're playing the game. And then at the end, they all bought it. They're like, because we even had a little thread going afterwards. They're like, I forgot who first kicked it off, but one of our friends was like, I can't stop thinking about this game. And then so they all went and bought it. And when we played last night, our friend Keith wanted to go buy the game right afterwards. So yeah, just a really interesting, neat trick-taking game. Again, if you just read it on paper, it's not going to seem all that fascinating or all that interesting. You're not going to necessarily understand why you want to do it, but just play it because if you like trick-taking games and you want something a little slightly more advanced, give this a try because there's just a lot of strategy to it.
And the look, as we said, was really great. I was noticing that the artist Maxime Morin has been doing a lot of the games, that little small box games that we really like lately. So Bottle Imp, she did the art on Faraway, which is this great card game that we were talking about last year? Maybe last year. Yeah, last year.
This year. It came out.
This year. Yeah. We love that game. Really quirky little game. And our next small box game.
Wait, before we move on, because the original Bottle Imp, I guess, was 1 to 3 players. So this one supports up to 6 players.
Oh, yeah.
So there's also, there's free for all mode. There's team mode. You can play in teams.
Which we haven't tested out yet.
Yeah, we haven't played that one yet. There's also a 2-bottle mode where there's 2 bottles that are going around with different prices, and you're trying to avoid both of them, of course. Or you want them until you don't want them. So there's a lot of different ways to play in this box.
Which is cool, but you ruined my amazing segue. But
it's fine. What's your amazing segue?
It's the same artist. Who does our next game? So the next game is Codis Naturalis, sent to us by Panasaurus. And art also by Maxime Morin, I guess. And it's a very abstract game about building out a tableau in a way to score points either at the moment or endgame objectives, essentially, right?
Yeah, so, a little engine building.
Definitely a little engine building. But a lot of spatial puzzle to this game that I did not grasp this first time I played it. It was very, like, once you got it, it was like cool, but I hadn't planned ahead for certain things that now I would look back and be like, I should have watched out for that because you are limited. So like on your turn, very simple. You have some cards in your hand. You are going to place a card into your tableau as you build out this fancy manuscript, essentially. But then some cards require that you be able to pay for them with resources that are showing on your tableau. And other times when you're just placing a card, you just need to make sure that there's a legal place for you to place it. The cards will have corners cut out, and you're only allowed to play cards on a corner cut out while some of them are missing them in some corners. So you have to figure out the spatial alignment of these things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fairly simple game because like basically at a quick glance, what resources you can see on your tableau are what you can have to buy other cards. And there's some cards that are mainly designed to give you more resources, some designed to give you scoring. And then the scoring cards have a cost to them. So you're like, I need 3 of the blue foxes and 1 of the green leaves in my tableau to be able to lay this card down to score points. And then objectives might be you need cards to be arranged a certain way, or you need a certain number of symbols and things like that. So it is engine building, tableau building, but it plays very quickly. Like so last night was the second time I played it and everyone else's first time.
Yeah.
And I think we finished in like 20 minutes or so, 20, 30 minutes at the most for 4 players. But still very satisfying because you get to build this engine. My one complaint about this game is, both times it happened to me, both times I played it, where there's gold cards and there's resource cards, and they look very similar. The only real difference is like you have to kind of look at the cards, the little details on the cards, and there's also a gold foil on it. And then so it's not immediately apparent like how do you break it, because there's also starter cards, there's objective cards, and they're all kind of small. And then so the first time I played, I was like, wait, how do I sort these and what? Because they look very similar. And I'm like, eventually I'm like, oh, I have to look for this gold foil, which is somewhat subtle. It's not like...
It's very pretty, but subtle also.
Yeah, not a big deal at all by any means, but you just have to remember not to get all these different cards mixed up because they don't have different backs. That's the problem. Because you can also use the backs of all these cards. So one interesting thing is all these resources we're talking about that build your engine, a lot of them are sitting on the corners of the cards that you will be covering. So you have to make a decision. If I place this card over this corner, it's going to also cover up this symbol that I might need in the future. That's okay. You're going to have to make some of those sacrifices. But if you flip over the card and play the back side of the card instead, it offers you a permanent symbol that can't be covered up. The middle of the cards don't ever get covered up. So you can also play these in a way to build permanent resources. But I didn't find myself doing a lot of that because I mean, I actually did. And I think that was my downfall because this is my problem with every engine building game. I like building the engine more than I like scoring.
He doesn't like winning. So
I don't like winning. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, this will give me a permanent resource. This will give me a permanent resource. But that's like long-term thinking for a pretty short game.
A very short game because you have to balance like short-term gains versus that long-term objective. And I was not able to balance that well because, our friends were pushing the end game because once anybody hits 20 points, then we finish that round and do one more round. So it's a very, very quick game.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's really pretty in a sort of abstract art-wise. Like it's very minimalist art, a lot of line art.
Gold foil, super nice.
Yeah. It's just,
even though hard to sort.
Yeah. Again, we were holding it up to the camera if you could see what this looks like on YouTube. But all these little cards, they're just really pretty. And then because they're small, because it's going to take up a lot of space, because eventually you start building out your tableau, they have to expand in different ways. So the game actually, despite building out your tableau, it doesn't take up a lot of space because they use these small cards. But yeah, I really liked it. It was like a very interesting, again, small card, small box engine building game.
Just have to have enough table space to lay out your tableau. Yeah. That's about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. Very cool. That's Codis Naturalis.
All right, now we're going to upgrade to medium-sized boxes.
They're getting a little bigger.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about this one first. Looot. It's Loot with an extra O in it. 3 O's. Because it's... Oh, I'm just looking at this now. I'm realizing it's looking like a little Viking boat.
Yeah.
Oh, I never realized that. I never noticed this about the logo. Yeah.
Today I learned for Shoe. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So this is by Gigamic. And this is, how would you describe the game? It's sort of like a little area control.
Yes.
But not really, because you can't ever be in the same area. But basically, the idea is, so you're going to build out this map, and these maps have a bunch of little hexes in it, and your Vikings are kind of exploring new lands. And so if if I put one of my Vikings down on a hex, no one else can, but people can build and explore from there. And on these hexes are different resources that you could get that might provide you like sheep or additional warriors, trees, lumber, and things like that. But also connect you to different spots on the map. Like you might connect watchtowers to each other, or you might connect to different castles. So there's different rules about like if you can make these connections, you get additional bonuses. But the basic idea is when you explore these spaces, you will get a tile, a hex to put on your personal board. And then this is the fun for me. This is the coolest part about this game. So on your own map, you might have a bunch of your player board. You have these little spaces to put hexes from what you explore in the main board.
Treasures down, all that good stuff.
The sheep, the trees, and all this stuff. But different things will give you different scoring conditions. Like one other tile, like you might have a boat that says, I need a tree, an axe, and a sheep next to this. And then you explore in the main board to grab those tiles to put next to the scoring tile to get points. But there are other scoring tiles. So what you're trying to do is this interesting puzzle on your player board where you have different scoring tiles placed in different spots. So you want to double count as many resources as possible because you have limited space. So if I have, for example, scoring tile number 1 requires a sheep, scoring tile number 2 requires a sheep. If I could place them one hex apart from each other and place a sheep in between them, then the one sheep has now served both of those scoring tiles. Right. So it's just this free form open space where you're like, how do I really maximize my limited time exploring to make these resources count for as many different scoring opportunities as possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've only played this game once, but I really liked that spatial aspect to it also.
No, you played it more than once.
I didn't know. Well, find out. I'll check my board game statistics.
Yeah.
But yes, I really like the puzzle of how to place things to best score. You are competing in certain regions to try to put out some of your buildings. I remember there was some like trying to make chains or something like that.
Yeah, for example, if on the main board there might be piles of watchtowers, and so if you could connect your Vikings and connect them as you're exploring, you can then get one of those watchtowers to put on your scoring board for more opportunities. And there's other ways to score. There might be tiles that say, hey, your trees are worth 1 extra point, or your sheep are worth 1 extra point, and things like that.
I've only played this game once.
Oh, okay.
It's shown, it's proven.
Okay, I played it a few times. But yeah, so I kind of liken it to Heaven and Ale. Remember that it's a heavier, it's been a long time. We played it a long, long time ago. But it's the same idea of like you're laying tiles out, but you want to maximize their placement because you want things to count for more than one area if you can.
I like that part.
Yeah. So I really like this puzzle. You also get a few powers to let you make maybe 2 moves in a row, or maybe this will allow you to break the rule and let you share space with another Viking, but you can only use that once. And again, because it's a medium box game, it only takes maybe about 45 minutes or so to play like a 4-player game. It moves pretty fast, but it's just really rewarding because you're just like watching your player board. You're like, oh, you feel really good if you could kind of really maximize and min-max the space that you're given.
You're competing for all these common things on the board. So sort of racing for that. And there's a good amount of strategy for such a quick game too, I remember. So yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at pictures of the game, I don't think...
Those are super easy though.
Yeah. It doesn't look that exciting because there's not a lot of color. Like the board, it's a lot of just kind of this light green. Your player board's a lot of light green. It just doesn't have great table presence.
But a true Viking would see its potential.
Yeah. A true Viking doesn't care about table presence. Yeah. So don't let its kind of very basic look fool you. The player board, like taking the tiles to put onto your player board and arranging them in a way that really maximizes scoring, it's very rewarding. Like I really love that part of the game. And so that is Loot. Anything else you want to say about it?
Loot.
Yeah.
And next we have, love the theme on this one, In the Footsteps of Marie Curie. So I think I posted this once on a picture just because I was playing it that day. And immediately, like, some friend of mine was like, that looks like a game you'd play. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. Yes, admittedly so. It's from Sorry We Are French. Love their name as a publisher. And it's actually a very, very light game, I would say. Like, it is sort of like modeling or you're playing through Marie Curie's life through these different years, essentially. And so on these years, sort of specific like events may occur as you are exploring and doing experiments to learn more about radioactivity, essentially. And so Marie Curie, of course, famously won a Nobel Prize for discovering radium and with her husband, and it was a huge deal. Also, she died of it, so that's cool because nobody had known how bad it was for you. Fascinating background story. Well, it was a fascinating story because like they'd never known how dangerous it was, but it would glow, right? These radioactive metals and ores would actually glow when they refined them. And so people would think that they were so cool and trendy and like keep a glowing thing next to them on the nightstand or wear it as jewelry.
Yeah. And can you imagine wearing radioactive material?
So it's cool. Yeah.
So cool.
No, there's cool little touches too. There's this, essentially in this game, you are trying to acquire resources and then spend those resources to, do research or achieve certain objectives and things like that. And you put these resources, which are little cubes of different types of metals, like plutonium or whatever, I don't remember exactly. You put them through this little cube tower.
It's like a cube tower, but wait,
yeah.
So I meant to ask you, this cube tower is pretty bulky and pretty big and substantial. If you can see on the video.
You can unscrew it and becomes 3 parts that fits into your box.
Yeah.
Fine, right?
So it's like a dice tower, but a cube tower.
Yes.
There's like things inside to make it jumble up a little bit.
Yeah.
But what is there thematically?
It's a storage thing. It's a thing that stores radioactive metals.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, what it adds is the randomness to this game because on your turn, there's a set number of different colored cubes that go into the tower according to basically a timeline that you follow. And so every turn you're putting different cubes in. Whatever comes out at the bottom are what you are potentially qualified to grab. But not all of them will come out. So that you're like hoping for some. But so on your turn, you can either grab cubes and resources up to a certain limit, and you may upgrade that limit through this game. Or you opt to sort of publish a theorem or something like that, which is another way to get some resources and build up a little bit of an engine. So the nice thing about this is you've got this like cool little player mat and you can upgrade your lab. Essentially, you can upgrade the number of cubes you can take or the number of cubes you may store between turns. And it's just a very small little objectives that you're working for at all the time. You can turn in like a few black cubes and like 1 silver cube to, finish this objective. And it's like it's a little race among you and your other players to try to score as many points as possible, some set collection, things like that. Very beautifully done. This is a follow-up to In the Footsteps of Darwin. And so I did find it tough because I didn't play the first one. I don't think it matters, but I was just wondering what the thematic connection between them would be. But I think it's more of like an overarching theme. You have different scientists that you're following through, but they have very different ways of playing through this theme. I believe the Darwin game was more of a tableau building game, and this one is like cube resources and building out your lab. So it was a cute little game, low scoring, surprisingly, and goes really, really quickly.
Yeah, it has a little bit of engine building as well, and it's very pretty. You see on the main board, there's a timeline that kind of keeps track of the time of the game, and you'll see little pieces of art that kind of show like phases in Marie Curie's sort of work life, I think. And then on your player board, there's beakers and flasks shaped spaces that's going to indicate what you're doing in the lab. So if you look at it thematically, it's
very sciencey.
Yeah, very sciencey, colorful, very appealing. I'm not sure this game really did a lot for me, though. There's
not enough science in it for me. That's why I obviously really like sciencey things. I love the look of it, and you can read about her life and learn about her life from this game. But the actual theming of the game was very just abstract and not really. It wasn't really for me a very sciencey game that I was expecting.
Yeah, for me, it's just like a lot of like I didn't care so much that it wasn't the tie to the theme like you're talking about, but I think like just the cubes is like, okay, you're trying to get the right cubes, you're trying to get them at the right time. Mm-hmm. You could change some cubes into other cubes, like you combine two of one into one of another, and it just was ultimately it was fine. It wasn't bad, but it just didn't necessarily, I think, excite me in terms of like this cube management thing that they had going.
It's basically cube management, I would say. Yeah, very pretty cube management. And there, the second time I played it too, like, it did emphasize there is a little bit of strategy to the tempo of the game and how things progress through the years that you can take advantage of or, get a disadvantage of if you're not paying attention. So there is some light strategy to it. But yeah, I would not go into this expecting this to be a very chunky science-themed game. It has science trappings, and then it's sort of resource management and conversion.
Yeah, I think it's for like if you're more of a beginner gamer and then you're starting to step into the world of more complex heroes, this is a great stepping stone in terms of that, in terms of learning like, oh, like this is building an engine, this is building a scoring engine and things like that.
Yeah, surprisingly tight in that winning scores are quite low. So you have to, every point counts.
Yeah. So it's in the footsteps of Marie Curie. Next, we're going on to the big box games, right? So the first one is Rallyman Dirt. So this is a bigger box game, but a big box game. Yeah.
And so Rallyman Dirt is a newer version of a game that's been around a while called Rallyman. This is obviously about dirt rally racing because I'm not an expert at that, but there's a lot in this box. So I will preface it by I find the rules a little bit difficult to learn. I had to teach it a couple times. But once you get it, like, okay, it's actually quite a Euro strategy game rather than like, I'm going to roll a bunch of dice and it's all like, wild and crazy and stuff like that. You have to be pretty strategic in this game. So in Rallyman Dirt, you build out a stage of a rally. You can play just a single stage and it actually quotes you how long it should take for like 3 to 4 players if you're playing like a stage or a whole rally of several stages. And they have suggested routes for you and stages in the back of the book, which are really nice. You lay them all out with these hex tiles and you race. Okay. But the racing is timed. And so when you're doing a rally race, you're not racing side by side against each other. You're delayed. And so one person will do the whole race and then you see your time and then compete to the next person. They're time trials essentially, right? So that leads to a slightly funky way of taking your turn. So with 4 players, the first player gets to go first. And then in their second turn, they get to go again. And then the second player goes for their first time. And so
in the second round.
In the second round.
Yeah.
Third round, first player is going their third time. Second player is going second time. Third player finally gets to start. And so it's all staggered. And we were like well down the route before the fourth player could actually go. But there's an advantage and disadvantage to going first and last also. Obviously, if you're going first, you can take a lot of advantage of like trying to build a big lead, things like that. But they balance it by giving you slightly disadvantaged dice, right? And by the time the last person goes, you see how everybody else did, and you can actually plan accordingly. So there was some very interesting strategy judgments that the fourth player had made that did help him win last time. So the strategy behind this, it is still dice-based, but there's very specific gear dice. So you have to change gears in a way that makes sense, right? So you start in 0 gear, you can only move up 1, 2, 3, 4. There's only 1 die for each number. You plan ahead and say like, what gear do I want to get to? You've got some dice that will let you coast at the same speed, and then a special die that will let you brake more quickly. But the more dice that you play, the higher the risk. So even though you plan out the dice, you either decide once it's all planned out, like, oh, I'm aiming to get to this spot in this gear, then you have to roll the dice. So each of the dice, depending on how quickly they go, there's more and more hazard faces on them. And so the more dice you're rolling, the more you can lose control. Automatically, you just spin out of control and stuff. So you just need 3 symbols and you're out, essentially. And you suffer by like having to go back to first gear and get a really, really long time for that portion of your run. So at the end of the game, you're always adding up like the time it takes based on the gear you ended in. And you're trying to, undershoot everybody, right? But you get a fun little reward for risking things. So you can roll your dice one at a time. And when you're about to hit that third hazard dice, you can just decide to opt out. Like, okay, I didn't make it all the way for my goal, but I'm safely at this spot. And then you end at whatever gear you are, you take that card, okay? However, you can also go flat out. Shoe loved doing this. And you would just take all of your dice from your plan, roll them all, so you have to like accept whatever the fates give you. You get an advantage for that because if I rolled 5 dice all at once, I would get a minus 5 second token that will give you some advantages and lower your time at the end of the game. But if you hit your like maximum damage, sort of maximum hazard thing, then you lose control again, essentially.
Yeah, I like that. It's again, it's not really about rolling the dice, although that's an important part of the game, right? It's really fun because when it's your turn, again, it's not a race either. It's just how fast can you go, and comparing times at the end is how you win. And so, but the game makes it so all the cards are still on the track at the same time. So that staggered turn order that you talked about, but people could get in each other's way. So if the person in front of you is too slow, they can actually get in the way because the person behind them is caught up to them. But when you plan out your turn, you lay out your dice. So let's say it's the very beginning. So I'm going to put my 1 die in the next spot, my 2 die in the next spot, then the 3rd die in the 3rd spot. So that indicates I'm going from 1st, 2nd, 3rd gear, and it's showing progression. Whatever die you end up with, so is the gear you finish with, is the card that you draw and the time that you took. So if I end on 6 gear, for example,
it's only 10 seconds.
I took only 10 seconds, but if I end on 1st gear, it might take, I think that's like close to a minute, right? Or 50 seconds or something like that. So you have the time, you have to plot out, like in rally racing in real life, it's all about like navigating the curves and the turns and the hairpin turns and such. So you can't go into those too fast, otherwise you risk going out of control. And so it's managing that, but getting to go as fast as you can otherwise. But you have to plan for the next curve, because if you're just constantly like, as soon as I get out of a turn, I'm going to go right into 5th and 6th gear to lower my times, you're going to be going way too fast into the next turn that's coming up. So you're constantly planning and planning and planning. So it's a very different feeling kind of racing type game, right?
Yeah, you don't get the like. It is fun in terms of like trying to go as fast as possible. There's different like features that you can build into the route for that stage, like jumps or like shortcuts and things like that. But there's risks associated with them. So I think that part's really well balanced, but you're not getting the same like side by side racing feel as like Heat, pedal to the metal, something like that. So it's just a different feel for this sort of game. Very fun, definitely more, I would say, Euro-y. To me, like in terms of strategy and planning.
Yeah. But then it was fun because they also threw in this dice rolling mechanic, right? Because you can be like, everyone's all excited to watch one person roll 7 dice because one time I rolled 4 dice. Hazards aren't even on 50% of the faces. Yeah. And then I rolled 3 out of 4 dice rolled hazards. And Christina even taunted me before I rolled. I'm only rolling 4 dice. It's a pretty safe roll. You're not.
I was like, wouldn't it be so funny if you lost control on this roll?
And then I rolled, and I'm just staring, and I'm like, I rolled 3 hazards. I can't believe I rolled 3 hazards. That's hard to do. So the game it's like a little bit of risk, just enough to keep things kind of, I think, a little bit more exciting than if they didn't have this mechanic in this game. I think it'd be a lot drier if they didn't. But then you're like, okay, I lined it up. I'm going to take a risk. Screw it. I'm going to roll all 7 of these dice at once and then hope that you don't roll 3 or more hazards. So there's this exciting moments. And at the end, you're adding up all the times of all the different cards that you drew along the way that indicated, what gear you stopped on. And then all the minus time tokens because you took these risks. And then there's also the Sisu thing.
You can add in. I think Sisu is a Finnish term for Being determined while driving, I forget now. So people who race might know this, but you can add in this little thing for first-time players where you can use a Sisu token. Once per game, you're going to be extra determined, and then you don't have to suffer the consequences of rolling all those hazard faces, basically.
Yeah, it cancels out your hazards, but I used that quickly, and I still was spinning out constantly.
Yeah.
So, if you can be, for such a strategic game, I could see a complaint being like, you're still at the mercy of dice. And if you get unlucky, you might not have a good time. But last night, I was really unlucky. I was constantly spinning out, but it was still fun. Because you don't really know until the end if you won or lost. So it doesn't feel like, man, there's nothing I can do. I knew I was losing.
Yeah.
Everyone at the table knew I was losing. But it was still fun to kind of like, okay, I'm still going to get across the finish line. And then the staggered turns thing that Christina described doesn't really mean people have a different amount of turns, because then at the end, the fourth player is going to make up for that time, like with a few extra turns at the end. But it doesn't feel like we all have to sit around and wait too long.
Yeah, because they're still pretty quick turns.
Yeah.
And last player was, our friend Keith took advantage of seeing everybody handle these curves, and he went into some of these curves with a different strategy than other players. So there was an advantage to being last too, and taking and sort of seeing the mistakes other people make. So.
Yeah. All right. That's Rallyman Dirt. Very interesting game. Yeah.
Finally, we have a beautiful game from Red Raven Games called Creature Caravan.
So another engine building game. Dice placement and engine building. So this game might be my favorite Red Raven game to date. And we like a lot of them. Like Above and Below, Near and Far.
Sleeping Gods. We played the campaign
once. They have so many really cool games. Empires of the Void. But this one, after I played it, I'm like, I think this is my favorite Red Raven game. You weren't quite sure you're ready to make that commitment.
Because I like
there's a lot
games,
of
but it's a really good game.
Yeah.
I really like this game. Why don't you describe it?
So in the beginning, you build out a map of 4 of these map tiles, and they all contain a grid. I think it's a 5x5 grid, 6x6 grid. And then you build it in a straight line. You're basically creating a path. All players will start at one end of the line and try to reach the other end of the line. And in between, there are like mountains and plains. And
because there are ember zombies have invaded from the volcano, you are leading a caravan to try to rescue people and animals and things along the way to take them to the one land that is protected against these ember zombies.
Yeah. So the basic gameplay is everyone will roll 5 dice simultaneously and figure out where they want to place their dice, because you're going to build a card tableau in front of you. And over the course of the game, you're going to get more and more of these cards. And those cards will have different places. They're creatures of the caravan. Your caravan's growing as the game goes. And then but these creatures or these cards will have different places to put dice. Like some might want specific numbers. Some might want a certain number or higher, things like that. And then they will let you do various things like get additional resources or take out some of these zombies, because there's the periods of time in the game where zombies will now start to attach to your caravan, and you need to get rid of them because they're negative points.
But they are slow, shambling zombies. So
yeah. So not too scary, not scary at all. It's as you can see from this cover, very bright and colorful, beautiful art, of course, from Ryan Lockett. But yeah, so the dice placement, I love dice placement games. Like I love more than worker placement. Like it's just, again, the idea of rolling dice and trying to figure out where to assign them, right? And then do you use some powers to re-roll dice or to change the value of a die? And then all these cards, there's so many different cards that will allow you to do different things, but you might combine them for an attack to take out the zombies. And then there's this whole more tense kind of interaction between the players, because there's these 2 different boards, one for more marketplace trading, one for combating zombies. So for example, if there's one slot for like 10 strength zombie, right? So that means you need 10 or more attack to kill the zombie in this one slot on the scoring board. If I get it, then I'll put a token on there that everyone else has one more round to try to also get that before that slot is closed for the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's really smart. I like
So it's
that.
a race to score because you can't just like, it's not just about like score as many points as you can. It might be like, oh, we're all relatively the same power. Shoe just killed the 10 power zombie. Now, do I want to go for that, or do I go for a lesser scoring zombie, or do I save up attack for better scoring zombies? But all those are limited. So it's not as though just kill as many zombies as you can. You have to think about who's killing what zombies, and you must race to them to get to those slots on the scoring board before they go away forever. So there's a constant race in terms of scoring and finding the places, but there's also kind of this interesting thing about how do you move your caravan through this map, right? Because I had one of the games I played, there was I was more rewarded for going through mountains, which is slower, but if I could stop at them, there's more resources available to me. So do I take a slower route to get more resources, or do you race to the end because there's also rewards for getting to the end as well? So, and you have a limited number of turns, and you just build up this engine, and it gets bigger and bigger, and you're just like, oh, you have all these choices. You get to be more powerful. Yeah, I really love this game. There's also a part of that engine that you're building is helping you determine what terrains you can move through as well, right? Because sometimes like, oh, now I've built airships in my caravan, and then now I could fly through areas more easily and things like that. So there's a movement engine building. There's a scoring engine building. There's zombie killing engine building. So there's a lot going on in this game, but in a very, very good way.
Yeah, I think the rules are very like intuitive and straightforward. Once you can teach it well, then the players are going to be like, okay, it all makes sense. But the sort of like closing market, the timing on it was very different. You are actually taking simultaneous turns too, so everybody's placing their dice and moving at the same time. And so the risk there is just making sure that we wait for everybody to finish their turn, see where everybody ends up, and then we'll move into that next round. But you're like eager to take your next turn as you're playing this game. So
yeah, it can get, if there's one complaint, I would say like it's the games I've seen and played. Towards the end, it gets a little bit AP analysis.
There's
process.
so many options. At that point,
because at that point you might have like almost a dozen cards in front of you. You roll these dice. You have options again to change. A lot of dice placement games, you get this problem, right? Of like, okay, I could change the value of this die. I could change the value of that die. And if I do that, I could put it here. But then if I don't do that, I could put it here. And then which way is the most optimal? So there's been times where everyone's just kind of staring at their board and kind of analyzing all these choices. Not terrible, but because, like you said, it's simultaneous. So it's not like everyone's just sitting around waiting for one person. Yeah. Usually, there will be inevitably one slower player that everyone is waiting on, but it's not bad because you're not spending your whole time waiting for just them to decide what to do.
Because you can be planning your next turn, things like that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the art, so a lot of Red Raven games has a little bit more of a dreamier kind of art style to it, like all the stuff. The space place still in the
Arzium.
Same, in Arzium. So it's the same world that a lot of their other games take place in. Like again, Above and Below and such. But this art is more colorful and a little bit more hard lines, I think. I'm not an artist. I don't know the language that people use to describe this. But it's like, it's not quite the same style as like Above and Below and some of the Sleeping Gods and games we've seen below.
Same
like
setting, though.
Very distinct Ryan Lockett art style. So this is a little bit more, I don't know how to describe it, a little bit more...
reminds me a little bit of like more like traditional cartoon drawing, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit more cartoon because it's a little bit brighter and sharper than what, but it's not kiddie by any means. But it's also kid friendly. Like there's nothing in here that to me would be too scary for like I don't know. The little kids aren't going to play this game. It's a great weight. It's like squarely medium weight, maybe on a lighter end of medium. It's not too heavy, and again, I really like this game. This is we played so many Red Raven games over the years, and this is at the top for me. I think, yeah.
Big words.
Yeah. It's you like it a lot, but what's your favorite Red Raven game?
I don't know. Still, I mean, I really enjoyed playing through Sleeping Gods. So it's just a very different feel because that's a campaign sort of game instead with very narrative based. As a pure sort of like more tabletop sort of game, I'd say Creature Caravan is definitely one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah. I hope it does well enough that maybe it might get an expansion someday or something with more content, or we could explore more in this dice building world. But it's I just love the simultaneous turns, the dice placement, and the sort of all these different races for scoring and getting to the end. Yeah. It just all comes together really well. There is an expansion in one of the versions where you can play 5 or 6 players too. So we haven't played it that many people. Yeah, we've only played, I think the most was 4. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That might take a while because you're adding more people with AP. Depends on the people that you know. Yeah. But yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Cool. That's Creature Caravan. So thanks so much for joining us. Just talking about games. We have so many more to play and talk about soon. We're hoping to bring back some more guests soon. And stay tuned. We had a great time at our BGG Con with our board game quiz show that we haven't published yet. So look forward to that. Yeah, we'll publish that so you can play it along at home, the quiz that we ran at BGG Con. So we talked about BGG Con on our last episode, and you could also follow our social medias to see some of the things we've been playing and things that we were doing. Well, this is a shirt I got at BGG. Mordor Fun Run. But anyway, and so check us out and follow us for more games. Thanks so much for listening to us. Thanks to our editor, Mike Sipkin, for being awesome and making us sound great. Now you can stop listening and go play a game.